Hello and welcome back to the Chance Cube, where we are still reeling from an absolutely incredible weekend of Star Wars Unlimited, where we had the very first World Championships, or Galactic Championship, as we should say, because as far as we're aware, there were no other planets in the Milky Way having a Star Wars Unlimited tournament, to our knowledge, for all we
That
know.
we know of, exactly, yeah.
There could be an entirely different meta out there, but who knows? Either way, what we know is that we now have a world champion who did so with Mother TALZIN Red, a deck that we've been talking about on the channel past few weeks. And it was just an incredible weekend of Star Wars, wasn't it, Patrick? 3 days of non-stop turning those cards sideways and smashing into base.
Having the 3 days off to watch it all, and I think I watched all 10 hours on 3 days. Maybe not live, some of it, but yeah, for us in the UK, that meant finishing at like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning some days. So that was tiring.
How are you feeling now?
It's all good, all good. Energy drinks,
Oh,
keep
that's
you
the way
alive.
forward.
Yeah,
I've had the
until
mythical second cup of tea. I don't talk about this very often, but I have 1 cup of tea a day in the morning because I'm like, I don't want to get addicted to caffeine. And every now and then there's a TCG event that requires a second cup of tea at 2:30 on a Monday. And today was one of those days because I am also very tired. Not just because we wanted to stay up and watch the amazing action, but also because we actually had to do a bit of shopping overnight, didn't we, Patrick?
oh my lord, force lightnings are impossible to get hold of. But it's all good. We're
Well,
just gonna play the deck that beats the deck. That's what we're gonna do.
that's what we're going to try and do. I mean,
Yeah,
it was just, as you say, a fantastic weekend with just so much to watch and so
yeah.
many incredible games and so much innovation. And the best part of it was the fact that it was so well timed. It couldn't have been better timed than at the very beginning of a new set. Because we had just had Legends of the Force drop. We had not had a single event bigger than 53 players before Galactic Championship. So not only was it prestigious anyway, it was also the first opportunity we had to actually see what this meta is going to look like with. I mean, we just have so much data now, which is
Mm.
brilliant, and that is exactly kind of what we needed, right? Because whilst we knew Han Blue was going to be good, and maybe Han Green was also good because of what we've run into in locals and Karabast, what else was out there? We needed the best players in the world to show us, the best players in the world to direct us for our shopping list, as we mentioned, and that's exactly what we got. Was just so much new information, which is great, isn't it?
I mean, you always just want to piggyback off what smarter people can do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, boy, were there some smarties out there because did not see some of these decks coming.
No, that's true. Well, I mean, we did say last week, didn't we? We were like, well, there's going to be one thing that we can be like, hey, we said that, and we did talk about Kylo Ren. It's just
Yeah,
we not one of us ever said it in the same sentence as Tarkintown, so it's kind of like half of one, six a
yeah,
dozen of the other.
no,
So
100%. And boy, is this deck fun. I think we'll come on to it in a minute when we have a little look at the breakdown. But yeah, there were some really fun decks. I think, like I said, Han2 Blue performed really well as expected. Talzin was great. I think Quinlan was that Tarkintown deck that, I was originally thinking, a Tarkintown deck was going to do good. It was going to do Quinlan or Cad, and turns out it was actually, I mean, there was quite a lot of Cad
a bit of
Banes
both,
as we'll
actually. Yeah.
go on to. But actually, when we look at the top eight, it's Kylo and Quinlan and a certain other Tarkintown deck, which I
Or
certainly didn't see coming.
exactly. I mean, that's exactly what we wanted. Was just stuff that we
Yeah,
just we didn't see coming. And there was a few things that everybody kind of knew. Like Mother Talzin was like the worst kept secret. We all knew that was going
yeah.
to be probably pretty good. So it's nice to see that do well. But you always want to be surprised. You always want to come away feeling like you got some spectator value. You learn some things for the next time you head down to your locals, maybe practice for a PQ or something like that. But if you can just be entertained in the process, then that's exactly what you want to see. Especially when we had one game of, I think it was Talzin against Cad Bane, where the players kept passing and claiming until the
Oh,
very first card that was played was a Talzin deployment. I mean, oh,
yeah. Chef's
chef's
kiss.
kiss.
Chef's kiss. Absolutely. Now, I want to talk about entertainment as well. Very quickly, quick sign. I think FFG did really well. I thought the presentation of the show was really good. I know there's been a few complaints of people who were there, but I think from a spectator just watching it on YouTube, the hand watch was great. I think it was the commentators were fantastic. It made sort of following the event nice and easy.
Yeah, it was. an event that did have some controversy to it, but mostly that kind of affected the players. And so us sort of kind
Exactly.
of glossing over that is not to necessarily, because I have exactly the same as you, Patrick. I just feel so happy that I was able to engage as a spectator, which I don't say to be dismissive of the issues they had. There's nothing I can do about that. FFG probably aren't watching this, so they probably don't care what David and
No.
Patrick think on that particular subject. But as people that have watched, live coverage of all sorts of things, Patrick, you've played Magic for a very long time. I've played Lorcana for about 18 months before this, and we both enjoy a bit of football and a bit of live sport as well. Having so much data on the screen so that you feel like there's nothing you don't know, especially when there's like 2,000 players as well. I mean, that really is just all you can ask for. And the hand watch especially was something that I found so exciting, especially with force throw. I mean, force throw is such an important card anyway, but if you can see what the options are for both players to throw at their opponent or what they're going to lose, that kind of thing. Oh, everything was great. And we're obviously in the broadcast business with our brand new YouTube channel as well. So they got the seal of approval from this YouTube channel, that's for sure. So well done to FFG on that particular front. We did talk about the data, so we should probably jump into it now because people are absolutely chomping at the bit to find out what was the most represented deck, what was the best deck conversion rate, all that sort of stuff. And like I said, we just have so many numbers here because we had so many days. I mean, day one was kind of when we say more casual
Wide
players,
open.
there was so many people because of course they're the people that didn't get buys, for example, from having done well at some other event or whatever. So you can kind of see that in kind of the breakdown a little bit. For example, Darth Vader Yellow being the second most taken on day one. It's a very cheap entry level deck, or at least it can be. Because our good friend Adam came up to me in the store last week and said, I'm going to be that guy that says you oversimplifies Darth Vader and how dare you say it's an easy deck. And I was like, I knew there'd be one.
I think there's a difference between easy and simple. I think
exactly. He was joking.
It is a relatively simple deck. It's pretty hard to kind of master because it is so simple on the surface. So I think we're not being dismissive of Vader. I think it is, but it can be kind of boiled down to a draw to, play to, swing them sideways kind of thing.
Well, mostly yes. And then, as
you
said,
could.
hard to master, which is why it's so exciting that it did well.
No, I think that was 100%
later on.
There.
And so, there's a lot of it on day one, which is interesting to see. We're kind of glossing over Han Blue here, but I suppose we're kind of becoming Han Blue blind a lot of the time because it is the popular deck, but 15.5% on day one. I mean, let's get your take on this to start with, Patrick, because you're a long-time Han player. Everyone was like, "Oh, it's going to be everywhere. Force throw is going to kind of ruin the weekend." 15.5% is actually all right on day one.
Yeah, I think when you put it in with even when you put it in with Han Green, we're then looking at what's that 21%. That's not. Yeah, that's not horrible. I think when we looked at Kira, she was probably a bit higher than that last season. And I think when you looked at Django, he was much higher at the beginning of Jump to Light Speed. So I think 21% is absolutely fine. I think it had such a big target on its back. You either played it or you spent weeks perfecting a deck that could just take it out.
And that's really normal. I think that's the thing is that's just TCGs, right?
It's just TCGs.
A deck. There's a deck and there's a counter deck.
Yeah.
So,
and you have to know what the deck does. And on the surface, again, it's pretty simple with what the deck does. And I think there are, as has kind of been shown in this tournament, ways of getting around it. I do think there was a very high percentage compared to the next lot. If you think of Han at 21%, you then get down to Vader at 7.1. I do think that is because, like I said, there's a lot more people coming in who didn't get a buy for day two, and so are just going to play objectively the most powerful deck they think they can.
Or can afford, I suppose.
Or can afford, and it kind of gives them the best chance at getting those wins that they needed on day one to progress to day two.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, completing the top, I think it's 10 on this first graphic, as we had Mother TALZIN with basically just 7%, 6.9. Cad Bane, 4.7. KYLO Ren ECL, 4%. We did sort of think that maybe that could be a shell for Blue, Green, Black, although more on that later. Sabine on 4%, which I loved seeing that. As someone who, every deck I've ever played in Star Wars basically just flat loses to Sabine. The first one that didn't was when I finally managed to perfect my Piet to beat Sabine last set.
Yeah.
To the extent that I'm like, she's the boogeyman to me. So even when I was starting to win games against her, it always felt close, and I was like, oh, finally she's been chased out of the meta. Well, that's not entirely what happened. It's just that she wasn't that well represented on day one. But
Yeah.
so so at 4% there. Anakin Skywalker on 3.2 with the blue base, Quinlan Tarkentown 2.8, and then Kira 2.4%. You mentioned her earlier on. We're going to talk about her a little bit this week because
Yeah.
it's kind of confirmed really from this that she's probably not the blue, green, black leader of choice anymore. 2.4% on day one. Not.
Yeah. No, I think, like you said, bearing the lead a little bit, there will be a little look at blue, green, black later on this week. And I just think the deck has changed a lot. It's changed a lot. If you look on the scale of aggro mid-range control, it has drifted further into that control endpoint now. I think if you're playing the similar sort of mid-range as you were last season, you just can't outvalue what Han and TALZIN, and to a certain extent even CAD, can really do. I think you're still pretty good into something like Sabine, and if you're sticking with that slightly more mid-range. Obviously, you do kind of lose that a little bit when you go further down into the control range, but it's just the risk you have to take when these much better, more value-oriented mid-range decks can outvalue you.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, basically, power creep is a word that people sometimes like to avoid, and I don't actually say it as a bad thing, but when we have 5 health 2-drops, that's when you know that the dial is just going to shift by 1 health in terms of whether or not the previous consistent mid-range deck continues to have that level of control over a game. And we kind of had suspected that in the play testing that we've done. I think a lot of people had obviously suspected that because, lo and behold, 2.4% on day one, and the showing in later on also not particularly great for Kira, very sadly. But hey, we move on. There's new shells for blue, green, black, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, which is potentially exciting. And then we'll just reel off without too much information about the ones that were hardly there, mainly because at the bottom of the list is my boy Admiral Frietta, 0.8%. 16 people tried to take him, and I think one of them came like 43rd in the side event on day 2. So that one's for you, Kenneth Colley. R.I.P. But yeah, we had KYLO and Tarkentown, not the blue one, but the red one, also at 0.9%. Obi-Wan Virgin Temple, Palpatine Colossus at 1%, Gar Saxon Yellow at 1.1%. I was quite surprised with that because people were kind of excited about that for this set, but I think the testing hasn't gone as well for some people as they'd hoped, so just 1%. Boba Fett Yellow, which is still played way more than it should be, because I would argue 1.2% is too much because it's just a starter deck.
It's also, I'm going to talk about just a starter deck. We'll look at a starter deck leader later.
That is true.
But I don't think the yellow version of it's a burn deck that just doesn't have enough burn. It doesn't have enough legs yet at this moment in time. I think, as again bearing the lead, the Data Vault version of Boba Fett does look much better.
Yeah, 1.7% for the Boba Data Vault. So only 0.5% difference. But the Boba Fett Data Vault list is really annoying. It was one of the ones that would do me serious problems in set 4, because if you don't have units on the board, it sets the pace very well.
It's just a pile of very powerful cards with very powerful removal.
Yeah, pretty much. Which, let's be honest, is not bad most of the time.
No.
So yeah, that was day 1, and I think it starts to get a little bit more interesting, I suppose, when we move on to day 2, because this is when we're getting a look at the better players. I think we could say that with no disrespect to the day 1 players, because of course the people who made it to day 2 were doing so having done well at events, and that's what earned them their spot at day 2 without having to play day 1. So 23.1% this time for Han Solo Blue, 7.5% for Mother TALZIN, and then Quinlan in third at 6.2%. And then this was when I was like, oh, okay, then never mind. Tales of her demise were, premature. Sabine in a fourth, 5.9%. Cad at 5.5%, Anakin Blue at 4.4%, Han Green at 3.7%. So that sort of takes Han 2 up to
about 27.
27, yeah.
Yeah.
Vader Yellow at 3%, so actually a massive drop-off in terms of that representation, which I don't necessarily think is a reflection on the deck itself, because we're going to talk about, again, space decks in this meta are pretty good. I think it's just a reflection on some of those factors we mentioned earlier. And then Yoda at 2.9%. And then Kylo Ren Tarkintown finally showed up, because it didn't really show up on day one. All of a sudden,
I don't think it showed up at all on day one.
Yeah. It was in the hands of some very, very clever players. I believe from the Bothan Network, I think it's called.
Bothan Network, yeah.
I mean, I've heard many of them died for this.
That's crazy.
That's what Mon Mothma told me anyway. So, you know, we are lucky to have this deck list in our hands.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, but it's in the hands of some great players. So that's the thing. It's 14 players was all it was on day 2, and then honestly the conversion rate is just like insane, which we'll see in a minute, because I think it was like 4 of them in the top 20. You know, the 2 that made the top 8 got all the plaudits, but they weren't even the only ones. So obviously very, very good players. They're working on it for a long time, and we will look at it in some detail a little later. There was some other Kylos, you know, on page 2.
Yeah, I think page 2, that top sort of 6 or top 5 make me quite happy, and then I realized actually they didn't do great, but it is a lot of blue, green, black there, and that speaks to me.
Yeah, that speaks to your soul.
There they are. They're on page 2, but there was still a good sort of representation there. If you put those all together, clearly a lot of people did think that this color combination was still powerful enough to take to a world championship.
I mean, like you said, we're going to talk about it a little bit later this week. It's kind of possible that basically green, blue, black is just having a bit of an identity crisis. For now, you know, it's a short-term thing, because I think there's lots of schools of thought about how to do it. I saw a few people sort of suggesting that maybe what it needs is a play testing group to come together to work it out, because there's lots of this color combo with different leaders, and even within those different leaders, lots of different types of decks, and maybe it just needs a bit of groupthink, like we saw with the Kylo Tarkintown, to perfect the best version. And there's a few lists that could lead the way on that, which is interesting. But just bringing it back to sort of that top page, I mean, I think the thing that for me stands out the most, I mean, again, I'm being Han blind here, is Mother TALZIN already at like top, like second, and that's only going to shoot up, I think, just because obviously you know, someone won with it. So were you particularly shocked at all, or not shocked to see TALZIN as the second most?
Maybe to be the second most, 100%, but for it to be the best leader from the latest set, no, I don't think so. I think she is quite obviously the most powerful leader in this latest set. She's very consistent. She comes out early. She has a good body, and she's in a good color combination. So I don't think there was too much to be surprised about, other than the fact that it was the second most represented leader. So that is as kind of crazy that you know, will she ever reach these heights again? You know, is it beginner's luck? Is it whatever for this leader? But I don't think she's going anywhere.
No, I think she's going to continue to just to have a presence, because I think a lot of people are moving towards this now, if they can find Force Lightnings. Put it that way. If you were on eBay at 11.58 last night, you were in a slightly better spot than if you weren't. That's all I'm going to say. So yeah, I mean, but also again interesting and healthy to see that.
Yeah.
You know, there's no massive outlier here. 23% I think is fine for Han. The conversion rate, as we're going to see in a minute, is not as high as we thought, but it's not like doing bad. You know, it's, you know, it didn't win the event, but it still had 2 in the top 8. You know, so there's these things to me seem fine.
Yeah, I also think it's just great for the game from a visual, like from an optics thing, that their new leader just comes in straight away and does what she does. So I think the 2 leaders that we're going to talk about most for results from this tournament are 2 brand new leaders, and that's got to be good for the game, and good for Legends of the Force.
And just kind of exciting as well within the long-term concept of like rotation is coming, because you know, I mean, it's a little bit further off, but I mean, just without wanting to bore people with other TCGs, right now Lorcana is heading towards its first rotation, and that was my first proper TCG, and it's going to be like a tumultuous time, because the power level of the game is actually going to go down, because you know, sets 1 through 4 were basically very, very powerful. They went, oh man, okay, we're really sorry. We didn't realize that some of these cards were so powerful. They banned a few things, which does, of course, sound familiar to some Star Wars players, of course. But sets 5 through 8 have been noticeably less powerful, to the extent that when new sets come out, a lot of players go, I guess I'll play that. Actually, do you know what? I don't need to. It's kind of win more, or it's not as valuable as I want, blah, blah, blah. And so we haven't put new Lorcana cards in our deck for ages, right? So then when a new set launches in Star Wars and so many of the cards just immediately define the meta, that's so exciting. That shows you kind of momentum in terms of game design, in terms of where the game is going, where the game can go. And yeah, that to me is very, very exciting. And even when when old leaders do well, they do well because of new cards. Again, that's also very good. And a big shout out to the people that designed set 5, because some people said that sort of sets 2 and 3 were not as powerful as they could have been. Set 4 was a bit hit and miss because pilots were cool, but can upgrades really work? Well, finally we found a meta where upgrades are actually kind of spicy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think we'll talk about upgrades in a minute with a two very different looking kind of decks. But yeah, 100%. I think set 2 and 3 were noticeably weaker for Swoo, so much so that designers did actually come out and say it was a mistake. And so, like you said, it's nice that set 5 kind of has this power level. So when the cards do go, we're not stuck with draft decks.
Yeah, it's basically the opposite of what I'm worried about with Lorcana, is that the power level is going to drop, which might make the game more balanced. So who knows? But the point is you sit there and go, oh, I remember when I could do this. Whereas now it's like, I remember when I could play with Luke Skywalker, but now I can basically do it to 2 things because Anakin is better, So it's like, there's so many cool things that we're going to be able to continue to play with. So, yeah, and the conversion rates here, basically Han's was 16.4, which actually was still the best conversion rate. But obviously, there was the numbers start to kind of like come closer together in terms of how they performed, I suppose, compared to the overall share. Because then you have Sabine on 11%. This is conversion from day 2 to day 3. And then the KYLO Tarkintown, 8.2%. Then we got Quinlan 6.8, TALZIN 5.5, Cad Bane 5.5, Anakin Blue 5.5, Vader 4.1, Iden Data Vault 4.1.
Very exciting.
Spoilers for later. And also spoilers for later, because we're going to do a video on it this week. Emperor Palpatine Yellow, my guy. We're a little bit like I'm disappointed. This is my fault. Patrick has done nothing wrong here. We recorded a segment of what we were playing last week, and he was playing Maul Blue. It was basically Talzin with a different leader. So yeah. I've done you dirty there by not uploading it in time. And I did my video on Palp Yellow, and there was a Palp Yellow list that was very similar to mine that had done. It's one of these 2 lists, funnily enough. So we are going to revisit those later this week because we made a big mistake in not getting that video out. We're like, well, we need to chop a section out of last week's episode. Just take the bit out about Palp Yellow and Red Blue villainy. And it's like, oh, no. We're going to put it out. We're going to try and find a way to package it up so that we don't look like people who went, we told you in secret. Yeah. So... yeah, oops.
It is what it is. It's all good.
That's life sometimes.
That's life. I can't do that.
Yeah, don't do
that. We don't do that here.
But yeah, so that's the breakdown of the percentages of decks that moved on into day 3. And what we thought we'd do is basically just take you through the list that dominated the top 8. Because, of course, realistically, that's what you guys want to see. That's what you guys kind of want to take away from Worlds is, okay, what now? What do I play now? And it's shaken the meta up so much that we do need to look at these lists in some detail. And we can't start anywhere else other than Mother Talzin Red with the 4 space. What an awesome deck this is. Like, this just does so many cool things. If you like mid-range soft control decks, this is... it speaks to my soul. There's so much value everywhere. The list itself is not necessarily... like all that surprising because a few people have played iterations of this. You of course were playing that Maul Blue as well, but just sort of break down the list for anyone listening. It's basically 3 Acolytes of the Beyond, 2 Anakins, the new one, 3 Darth Tyrannus, 3 Krennics, 3 Grand Inquisitors, the legendary, 2 Jedi in Hiding, 3 Karases, 2 Kiadi-Mundi from set 3. Then 2 Night Sister Warriors, 2 Purge Troopers, 2 Secretive Sages, 3 Talzin's Assassin, 2 copies of the Sun, which was really cool because that was basically just winning games kind of out of nowhere in some situations because you basically just give everything +2/+0. It's awesome. 2 Devastators, 3 Force Lightnings, 3 Force Throws, 3 Power of the Dark Side, 2 copies of Arm to the Teeth, again for that additional push damage at the end of games, 2 copies of the Fallen Lightsaber, and 2 Hotshot Blasters, which I'm going to say played out of aspect because... there's no yellow here, so you don't get that smuggle benefit. But it didn't matter. We saw some games where the guy basically just kind of had no cards in hand because he kind of had some discarded in a Force Throw mirror and just went, I guess I'll just spend all 5 on my Hotshot Blaster just hitting your base for a stupid amount. It's not bad play, so really interesting. And then 2 copies of the Heroism Kiadi-Mundi in the sideboard. awesome stuff. I mean, as a red-blue villainy connoisseur, or burgeoning connoisseur, because you've started playing it, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I think congrats to Baton. Philip from Team Enigma, repping the motherland, Poland.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. This deck it's so good. It was made to prey on what they thought the meta would be, which was going to be Han and Vader, and it has enough of those -1/-1 type effects, the debuff things that can kind of deal with space, even though you're not going massively space heavy. And then you've got enough 2-for-1s in the ground to allow you to kind of match what your opponent's doing, until you ultimately deploy TALZIN, put a lightsaber on her, and go to town.
We'll go to Tarkintown, actually.
Go
What she did in the
oh
final.
my lord, go to Tarkintown. Yeah, no, I think this is great. I think you had things like the Purge Troopers, which I think were cards which is very meta dependent. You're looking for these force units coming down. I really like this card in Mundi. I actually played it a little bit when I was playing Krennic originally, and yeah, he was good. But I think here, especially in this meta of force throw, just having an ability to refill your hand is very good. Yeah, very, very powerful. The Krennic itself, I mean, talking of Krennic, it's so good in this deck because your turn 1 Krennic, and yes, it's not a forced unit, and yes, that does kind of feel a little bit bad, but you can then on turn 3 play, Acolyte of the Beyond and a Karis, because, they've got, when defeated triggers, you basically can double up there. You can play Jedi in Hiding and a force throw. You can do all of these very very powerful effects basically off the fact that you've played Krennic, even though he doesn't actively help you get the force in any way.
Yeah, the Krennic was a very cool piece of. I nearly said tech there, but that's probably wrong, because actually you are building around this to get the value out
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
your when defeated units. And I think what's kind of nice for both of us who love green villainy is this is kind of ramp. This is like it's character ramp by basically being able to cheat something in earlier than you were supposed to, which basically is how villainy decks have kind of dominated Star Wars for the past year. So villainy decks will never lose that. You're just doing it a different way. Krennic was very, very cool. And you also mentioned about refilling hand. I've already mentioned there that in the sideboard was that Ki-Adi-Mundi, the heroism one. We did see in the final him side that in to fantastic effect, because he had to spend 6 on it to refill his hand, and the commentators were a bit like, that feels a bit slow. But then what they then realized was that actually he was like at least 1, maybe 2 turns ahead of the commentators, because that Ki-Adi-Mundi eventually died, and now all of a sudden the Anakin gets a double trigger, which is just awesome. So, and there was an additional Anakin in the sideboard as well to go up to 3 if that's what was needed. So, there are ways that you can support this deck with some heroism cards to get some extra value out of Anakin as well. So, yeah, and like you said, the debuff for me is the main thing. You just always create favorable trades on the board, and there would be some games where they would be able to basically just kind of like wipe a Han board and make it so that everything lives. In some cases, maybe, or if it dies, you got value out of it, like a Night Sister Warrior drew you the card, or the Jedi in Hiding died and you took the last card out of their hand. The discard stuff that's at play here is another way of basically just kind of really putting your opponent in a tight spot. There are some cards here that are kind of understated, and it does remind me, I've said this to Patrick already, so he's probably sick of this analogy, but it reminds me of a deck I play in Lorcana, which is a discard deck that has a lot of the characters are not statted as well as you want them to be. They're understated compared to how much you pay for them, but the effects that you get when you synergize them together with the discard basically protects you from the fact that the stats aren't as good as they could be, and they work together to be greater than the sum of their parts, and that's what makes this deck so good. I think it's possibly a deck that's quite hard to play as well.
So 100%. I actually have seen talk about this as well, and I think Philip even said in one of the interviews on day 3 after, because that was another thing they did, which was interview the players after the game. And Philip said, he was like, look, this deck gives you no free wins. Like, it is, you have to play for every win. It's one of those, it's got a high floor, but it also has a very high ceiling. So yes, it's kind of hard to play and kind of hard to master, but the payoff is that you kind of have no terrible matchups, but because of that, you have no easy wins. And I'm going to put air quotes. They're not easy wins, but you have no super favorable matchups, should we say?
That's actually the kind of deck I prefer generally anyway. So that's why I think this speaks to me. Is like I want something that, in theory, has a decent matchup into everything, so that if I do or don't win, it was my
It's
fault.
player skill. It's player skill. Exactly.
That's easier to live with.
Yeah.
Everybody's different, but I hate games when it's like
You die to RNG.
I couldn't win this. I was just like, there's no way I could win this. At least if I made my own mistake, then I can quote Revenge of the Sith and say I've done it myself. So
yeah, you get drawn up against two least favorable matchups in the tournament, like it's happened to you before.
Yeah, it has happened to me before. But with this, maybe that doesn't happen so often. I mean, that might change. You know, people might start taking against this. This is the new hotness. Everybody's going to try and play it. So be aware of that. But, you know, try some games with it and see if it speaks to you. And if you can get hold of Force Lightnings, then I guess we'll see you at a PQ with this very deck.
Well, it's a card we're going to see more and more of.
Hopefully they might need to reprint some more. To be honest, there's like barely any available in the UK at this point. So sorry if you wanted one. I may have helped create that scarcity last night. I'm so sorry. Well, let's have a look at what other decks people could be playing, because if you can't find your Force Lightnings, then you know you might still want them for the KYLO deck, but you don't necessarily need them for the KYLO deck, because the KYLO Ren Tarkin Town deck is. Maybe I'm being unfair on KYLO Ren Tarkin Town. I just called Mother TALZIN the new hotness, but I think that this is the new hotness in the sense that, like, all of a sudden everyone's like, "Who is that?" You know, she just walked into the bar and it's like, "Who is that?"
Ooh,
you know,
Mamma Mia.
Because we just weren't expecting this. I mean, we talked about KYLO being an ECL deck or Data Vault deck, but these guys basically said, "Hey, do you know what? Miggs Mayfeld never got his time in the sun. So let's go." I mean, the amount of times this thing came out turn one, and it's basically what it's built around in its early game, is every time you discard a card from your hand, you get to put 2 damage on a unit. And that was quite good in the aggro deck, of course, but, you know, the old red one. This one, you just discard a card as part of your leader ability. So it's literally like a free Tarkin Town, because they play something, you play the Migs, you discard something, ping for 1, then Tarkin Town, and all of a sudden you've bought yourself that extra turn, so that you can actually push some early damage, so that KYLO doesn't have to come down as like a 32-37. He can just come down as like a like an 11-12.
He has done, though.
He has done.
But no, the thing with Migs, which is, I think you've kind of hit that perfectly there, is it allows you to take out these 5 toughness things when you're doing what you already want to do, which is discard a card to draw a card. So in conjunction with Tarkin Town, because this is another deck that between rounds they were talking about what iterations it kind of gone through, and I think Migs was a big part of them settling on Tarkin Town as the base.
Yeah, because you were talking about trying it with Thermal Oscillator, and we were chatting about it just over WhatsApp whilst we were watching the games. And then, incredibly, that came up in an interview where they said they had tried that, but they just realised that the value of Tarkin Town in conjunction with what the list was already doing. I think that's what makes it so good, is that it's basically rewarding itself for doing things that are already there. And like, I saw one interview with one of the players. I just can't remember if it was David or if it was Ian. They were the two that made the top 4.
Yeah.
But they basically said a lot of people have been scared of upgrade decks for a while because Confiscate exists and Power of the Dark Side exists. You know, you go tall on a unit, you lose your upgrade. Well, this deck doesn't lose the upgrade because you get some use out of it, probably, because you, I don't know, stick a Fallen Lightsaber on a Miggs Mayfeld and hit for 5. Or, you know, you put it on a secretive stage and hit for 5 or whatever. When the unit is defeated, that upgrade is coming back. On card.
Yeah, 100%. Even if you don't get to like swing with this upgraded unit, you've now made something that your opponent has to deal with as well. So maybe it gets a removal spell out of your opponent's hand that they weren't. Maybe they weren't going to take out your secretive sage. Maybe they were holding on to that one piece of removal they got in the hand for a slightly more impactful, again air quotes, impactful deployment of either a leader or a bigger unit. But now they kind of have to deal with this thing because +3/+0 on a just a 2/2, that clock gets real small real quick.
It definitely had the ability to be really gear shifty, because you mentioned obviously clock there, which is a huge key word for aggro decks. But
Yeah.
this is like blue villainy, which has power of the dark side and all kinds of removal, like force throw and force lightning as well. So that's what I think I was so impressed about, was that again it was a deck that kind of could do whatever it wanted to be. It could be the aggressor if it wanted to be, or it could be, because any control deck needs a big late game threat, and not many things get as big as, oh, by the way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play an Admiral Motti, and then I'm going to play a Sith Holocron and Snapshot Reflexes on my KYLO, so that it immediately attacks, kills my Motti, so that I do like 15 damage to base, and then immediately re-ready and do another 15. It does not get much more. That is a control game end, right?
I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna lie. I made a noise the first time that happened on stream. Honestly, I was like, "Oh God, you can do that in this game."
It's incredible, but like that's such a control maneuver, isn't it? Whereas
Yeah,
it is also capable of pushing 15 damage off, putting some lightsabers on some 2-drops, which is very aggro. So what even is this deck, Patrick? I mean, what
I
is
think
this
it's
archetype?
I think it is a flex combo deck. I think that might be the best way, and I think it might be the first true combo deck that Swoo has, in the sense of it has a combination. It has a combo in there that if your opponent isn't ready for, will just win you the game. Okay. It has a combo in there that if your opponent doesn't interact with the right piece at the right time, you just win the game. But you can turn your unit sideways and you can start off as an aggressor. If you get those MIGs, if you get those Secretive Sage, which by the way, MVP, if Force Throw is an MVP of this weekend, Secretive Sage must be up there as close number 2. Because he's turning up in a lot of decks. But yeah, you just kind of play a cheap unit, even Witch of the Mist. You put an upgrade on it, you turn it sideways, you probably got in for 4 to 8 damage, depending on what upgrade you've put on and how many turns it lives. They finally remove your piece, well, that upgrade's back in the bin. And like you said, this Motti Sith Holocron Snapshot Reflexes combo is, like you said, it legit does 30 out of nowhere pretty consistently. And normally at that point, you don't need to do that much. Normally by that point, if your opponent's on 30 health, or a lot of people are on 28 health this weekend, you've probably already done 4, 6, 8 damage, something like that. And then you don't need that many upgrades on KYLO if you're going to get 2 uninterrupted swings with him.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, I think it is the first time we've had a combo deck that can actually do something consistently, just because it has so much draw, staple to the leader. And it's not draw that is costing you tempo. It is draw that is literally setting up your end game simultaneously, because you, of course, are putting things in the bin to find everything else. So it does seem very, very good. And I think a lot of people are going to be playing this as well. It's slightly cheaper, I think, than the TALZIN deck if you wanted to buy this from a standing start, because you don't need the Grand Inquisitors, for example. You obviously still need the Anakins, but there's a lot of stuff here that's been in the game for a while, like the Hotshot Blaster, the Heroic Resolve, the Infiltrator Skill, stuff like that. I mean, Migs Mayfeld is just a set 2 rare, I think it is, that I think most people have probably play sets of anyway and went, why would I play this? Well, here we go. So
here you go.
Be prepared to face a lot of this in the next couple of weeks, I would say, guys, because it is very, very good. We'll have a look at some of the other decks then, because what we did also see was some Quinlan Voss in the top 4. And what's really cool about this actually is I think that this probably was a deck that basically showed the skill level of the player, because I watched this guy's games and he was always very, very well thought through, and plays he made, and he interviewed very, very well as well, had some good advice. There's not that much that stands out about this other than the fact that just like the Quinlan package as we know it is just good right now. What do you think?
I think Quinlan, and again, this was another deck where Ophir kind of said, we're not getting any free wins here. This is a deck that is pilot oriented, and he's not bragging about that. He's saying, look, I put all the time into this. I've played this deck since it's come out. I've made tweaks, and it's a very well-positioned deck at the moment, and I think it did get a few nice pieces in the latest set, especially Depa Palaba. I think that is a fantastic unit, another ambush unit, because ambush units with Quinlan are just fantastic.
A +1, basically.
But, exactly that. And I just think, look, I've really struggled to play Quinlan Tarkintown, and I think you'll be the first one to admit that you kind of struggled with it as well. I think this is This is a deck that if you draw things in the wrong order, if you play things even a turn off, it just crumbles. And actually, when I was playing Kira, I loved seeing Quinlan on the other side of the table because on the surface, it has a pretty linear way of dealing with it. You just kind of, you let your Quinlan stay on priority. You kind of make them play off what they want to normally do. You don't give them the free pings. Be aware that Ahsoka and Kira are going to do this hand hate business. But other than that, I don't. It's just a fantastically piloted deck, is what I was saying. And again, a deck with very powerful cards in it that I'm not going to lie, I just haven't made work.
I think I learned so much about this deck from this weekend because of what you mentioned there in terms of what he said, but watching the gameplay. And the commentators picked up on it at one point where there was it was like turn 4 or 5, and I think the Ophir had already played a Sabine. It had died, and he drew another one, and he hadn't deployed yet, so it actually might have been the 4 resource turn. And they said that one of the commentators said, when I've played Quinlan, I'm like, oh, here's a Sabine. It's not on curve. I'll resource it. This guy had basically kind of like assessed the deck he was playing against and was like, you know what, I'm actually going to need this because I need to clear that 2-drop that's still on the board because, it's got a lightsaber on it, it's got a shield on it, whatever it was. I can't actually remember what the application situation was, but it was like, that is a very, very nuanced decision to hold on to a Sabine to play off curve in this, because basically playing off curve is kind of how this deck does well, because you have to respond to what your opponent is doing. And it did also have some fantastic response to the KYLO deck as well. We didn't mention it when we were talking about it, but we're going to talk about it now because it's the very top card on the sideboard. When Aggrieved Parliamentarian came out in set 3, the very angry-looking alien guy. I've got so many copies of that card, and I would be an aggrieved TCG collector whenever I pulled one in a pack, because I was like, this card is trash. So many of my hyperspaces are this guy. I have never sleeved up a card faster than this aggrieved parliamentarian, because when you play it, it shuffles your opponent's discard pile back into their deck, which is basically the anti-KYLO at this point. We're going to need this on Friday. I know there's at least 2 or 3 players on our store who'll probably bring KYLO. So, great to see him kind of anticipate that there was going to be lots of KYLO decks. I mean, he wasn't necessarily to know there were going to be Tarkin Town variants, but he just knew that. I mean, Quinlan always struggles in the late game. Quinlan basically can't deal with a massive tall Sentinel because it needs to get through to finish off, and it also doesn't really have that much that you would call defensive plays. It doesn't run Sentinels, it doesn't run healing. So how can you avoid that in a world where Kylo Ren is going to be too big? Aggrieved Parliamentarian.
Yeah, beautiful sideboard piece that I don't think many people were running, and I'm surprised, because I do think if you think Kylo is going to be a thing, then just being able to shuffle the discard into the bottom of the library. I just want to correct you there slightly. It goes to so it's actually kind of better, because you are tucking them away. You're not shuffling it back in. You're not giving them the chance at drawing those back next turn. It's going to take a little while to get there. I guess the flip side for that is you kind of have a 2/2 after that.
True. It's not great on the board, but
it's not great on the board, but it could win you the game. And like you said, I think it was the semi-final or the quarterfinal? I can't remember. It kind of worked to perfection.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see the way that game went, actually, because effectively he was so close, Ophir, to not being able to play it, because the KYLO deck actually runs 2 copies of Pillage, and the timing of the Parliamentarian is really key. You have to make sure you play it at such a time that you hit enough, but you don't play it so late that, oh wait, he already flipped, or oh wait, I lost it either to a force throw or a pillage. And he deployed it earlier than he probably wanted to, but it still won the game, because he actually wasn't to know there was a lot of discard in the other player's hand to play around that. So anyone who's looking at this card and thinking, oh, this card is going to be a free win against KYLO, again, we keep using that expression about there's no easy wins, no free wins. Aggrieved Parliamentarian is by no means different to that either. You have to play it at the right time. You have to dodge the discard with it. Don't play it too early, don't play it too late, and that is a very big skill point. So just.
And I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head. That this is a skill point, and I think all the decks that did very well on day 3 in the finals in the top 8, they're all very skill-intensive decks.
Yeah, that's true. Again, this video is in no way a magic formula on if you take this on Friday, you're going to crush your locals, because it never works that way. in any card game, really. Net decking is helpful. It's a good starting point, but the nuances of how to play the deck. If you haven't watched the footage, go watch that.
Yeah, go watch it. Yeah, it's
That's going to
brilliant.
help you more. So
Exactly that.
I can definitely say that's what people should do. We do have to talk about Harm Blue, which I don't say when I say have to. It's a bit of an obligation at this point. We know what the list is. I mean, there's some copies of the daughter that was nice to see. As
Yeah,
a
I think
man of two girls, nice to see the daughter there.
I think the daughter. I think Owen Lars wasn't played unanimously amongst hand two decks. I think that was a pretty nice piece of tech to kind of protect it against force throw. I think a little bit because having this kind of cheaper one drop, and then if you need to, you can play it to get the when defeated trigger. Because obviously, we're playing all the force units on the planet, so that seems nice. But yeah, I think mainly as maybe force throw protection. There was the one-off Chewbacca. I didn't know if many people were playing this. The one-off smuggle Chewbacca. One player allows you to defeat a unit. I can't remember how much HP it's got to have left, but it's a big thing, and it's a 4/10 with grit, so that seems pretty tasty.
Yeah, more one-offs than before, but you can just get away with that with Chiari Mundi. Basically, you can afford to run that kind of thing. So mannequins as well. I don't think there was any Force Lightnings in this list, but some people have run Force Lightnings in Harm.
Off-axe, yeah.
Just to try
Off-axe,
just to get that Anakin to be better, really. And I think it's really easy to gloss over Harm Blue because, the story of the weekend was Mother TALZIN Red and KYLO Tarkentown, but this deck still converted pretty well into sort of like the top 20, top 40. There was still a really healthy conversion. This, I think, is broadly still the best deck if you remove player skill.
I think not only is it the best deck, I think it's still the best, or it will be the most played deck, 100%. And it's the one deck that if you immediately go, well, hand didn't win Galactic, so it's just not going to turn up. It will just bite you. It will come back in with a vengeance, and it will be impossible to win if you just haven't prepped into it.
Yeah, or perhaps maybe put something in your sideboard for it, or something like that. News in general, someone who's worked in the media, I can tell you right now, it can be very binary. You see all these names in the headlines and you think, oh yeah, Harm Blue is not it's not the hotness anymore, but it is still really good. So like you said, you absolutely can't afford to turn your nose up at it. I guarantee if you do that and you go, oh, I don't need this anymore because Harm's not the best deck anymore, I guarantee your next loss on a competitive in a competitive moment will be Harm Blue. That's just how it goes. So definitely keep an eye on that as the meta just continues to develop. But everyone's eyes are actually going to be on a different Han. The set 4 one, which we do have to talk about. He became the darling of the top 8 by even just making top 8 with, I mean, can we call this a pile of cards in a way that's not offensive to FFG and the guy who built the list? Or do you get what I mean? This is basically like someone took Kazuda Red and Vader Yellow and just kind of like dropped them on the floor, and then someone picked them all up and was like, oh, this looks all right. But it was actually really good.
Yeah. They had OCD, so they just removed all the even cost things.
Apart from
C3. But there is a 3 in C3PO, I guess. So
that's true.
That must count for something. No, I think this deck is so cool. And when you watch it on stream and he is run out of space because the space arena is so full of ships with pilots on, this is what they wanted in Jump to Lightspeed, 100%. This is what they imagined. Obviously, we've kind of brushed over, but Vader Yellow and this Han, 100% was what they wanted from Jump to Lightspeed. It just turns out when that is the focal point of your set, everyone just goes, well, here's all the upgrade removal. But I think this deck did very well. I think it'd be interesting to see. I don't have the numbers, but I think this deck would do very well in game 1 a lot of the time before you can kind of sideboard in some of that upgrade hate. That might be an interesting thing to kind of look for in the future, is just see how many of those wins that we got with this deck were from game 1.
Yeah, that's a good point. It did take a lot of people by surprise because no one's really played this. And the cool thing was, I think this was the only guy in the top 8 who played all 3 days. So this wasn't a guy who, was on anybody's radar before, the thing really sort of got going at the top higher most level. But it's Tarkin Town, just good. Everyone was worried about force throw. Well, maybe we should ban Tarkin Town instead. It seems to be every set. It's like Tarkin Town's the real problem. It's not actually a problem. It's just good. And so it's nice to see that whilst aggression has had a good weekend. There's different versions of it, of course. But that obviously just helps buy this deck a bit of space. It's still got some great cards in there like Plo Koon and Poe Dameron as well. And then, as you said, outside of that, it's just a bunch of spaceships with things on. And it's going to be interesting, I think, how this deck moves forward, because people will play this, because people probably own most of this anyway. Again, it's a deck that's probably not that expensive. Poe Damerons and the legendary Han Solos are probably the most expensive, but one of those is an organized play, so you might have stumbled upon a couple of those. Poe Dameron's been around a while, so you either already own it or you can borrow it off a mate, probably. Same with the Falcons, probably, I suppose. But with KYLO doing so well, do you think people are going to throw more upgrade removal? Are we going to see power failure come back, for example?
Yeah, I sadly, I think you're right. I think the pilot decks are just going to get hit by the hate that KYLO gets, which is sad.
Yeah, and disproportionately so as well, because I think the problem with the KYLO, what makes the KYLO deck so good, and there's something I was going to mention but forgot to say, is that KYLO doesn't care about discard or upgrade removal anyway. You put it in his discard pile and he's like, thank you. And if you force throw a KYLO player, again, they're like, oh, well, I guess I'll just put Snapshot Reflexes in there, which we saw that so often. They didn't even hesitate. Snapshot Reflexes, in it goes, because, again, late game, blah, 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 but it only costs 1, so it doesn't do much damage to your unit, that kind of thing. You play anything, but I think people will still try to put something in to deal with that, and then, it will have more impact against Vader and Han 4 than it will against KYLO, so... Yeah, it could be an interesting couple of weeks for those decks. So we should talk about Vader then, shouldn't we? Because it was nice to see that come here. And we're trying not to spend too much time on it, because it was basically what you'd expect for the most part, outside of the fact that it didn't have any overwhelming barrage. Like, that was the main thing. It played more of the small cost spaceships, and it played outmaneuver to exhaust an entire arena, which is more, it's a tempo play that's a little bit more cost efficient, because you could play that and then maybe play some other spaceships. So I quite like this. What did you think of this list?
I thought I saw outmaneuver stop Force decks from getting the Force so often, and that seemed really nice. Basically, the Vader player just takes initiative, and first thing they then do, outmaneuver, exhaust the Grand Arena. The opponent loses out on trying to get the Force, which might change what they do that turn. So not only are you pressuring an arena that your opponent is not very good into, or less good into, let's say, you're now kind of taking away their thing in the Force. I thought it was great. The overwhelming barrage not being in there, that scares me. It scares me as a green deck. But I wonder if also, because we haven't touched upon this, but this was from halfway through, I think they won it. It was an open deck list tournament after there was a problem with the deck list being available. I'm telling you now, if I'm playing sitting up against Vader Yellow, and it's not open deck list, I think I'm kind of trying to prep my board against an OB at any one time. And that OB just doesn't exist. So I wonder if that was, a bit of a failed piece of hidden tech, should we say, because of the problem with the deck lists.
But I mean, in a way, fair play to this player for still making top 8.
100%.
Being able to go in and be like, people probably underestimated it. They probably went, oh, I guess I'll be okay because I don't have to worry about an OB. Oh wait, everything of mine just got exhausted. And because, I mean, does outmaneuver cost 2 or does it cost 3? It definitely
outmaneuver costs 3. Outmaneuver costs 3, but that is it's a turn 2 play in this game, because we resource twice on turn 1. So at any time you can hold it up, and basically, because most of the time your turn 1 is playing 2 things, you've got this action economy where you can turn one of your units sideways, your opponent has to do something, and then you can react to it, or you just attack with the next thing. You then got the Vader ability where you can make a tie, so you're never kind of wasting activations, just passing, waiting for your opponent. You're always progressing the board in some way. I think this is where the Vader decks really do come into their own, and they've just got great actions available.
Yeah, because they can spend one, and I put that in the comments, or waste one on creating a
creating
TIE
a
fighter.
tie.
Actually,
Yeah.
that's quite valuable. I think you can play outmaneuver on any turn in this deck, and I just think it's good. If you play it on 2, you can play another spaceship. You probably attacked with your first 1, maybe 2, because
Yeah.
you hopefully played 2 1-drops. Create another one, so you already have like 5 or 6 units out by turn, like it's 4 resource turn. If you were to play the outmaneuver on what was previously the OB turn of turn 5, you can again play maybe 2 more spaceships, or maybe 1 more spaceship with slightly better stats, for example. Like some of the 2 cost.
Yeah.
So that basically just buys you that turn. I think also as well, OB may be losing some slight value. Like, he's losing like 10% of his value. We said this with the Kira flip. I think the same is true of a lot of units that previously were good OB targets, because we're seeing a big influx in lower attack, higher health units really kind of flying around. So OBs, in theory, disperse less damage now. And we're going to talk about it later this week when we look at the Palpatine list that did really well. That also had no OB in it, which, as someone who's played a lot of Palpatine Yellow, I was like, what on actual earth? You are supposed to actually be some kind of mid-range soft control deck, and you don't have OB. So this wasn't the only archetype that normally runs OB to not run it, which is probably a nice place to be, considering that when I came to this game at the beginning of set 3, whenever I played that against anyone, they would groan and their eyes would roll so hard I was worried their head was going to fall off. So...
No, I think that was good, and I just want to touch upon very quickly Scimitar sideboard, beautiful card.
Oh yes, yeah. What I liked about this was it got some hate on the stream from some of the commentators. Like, I don't understand why this is here, because you're never putting damage on this, because you're never attacking a unit. It's like, it's got 4 health and everybody sideboards bombing run in against this deck. So if you have a 4 health spaceship in this deck that gets hit by bombing run, that then gets more attack because it has damage on it, you're laughing as a Vader player. So again, incredibly smart tech from this Vader player to sideboard in something for his opponent's sideboards, because he just knows they'll side it in. So I did really like that. So, and it looks great, but also represents a real giga-brain list build there. So really, really nice to see. So yeah. That is all of the decks from the top 8, and as promised, we are going to look at some of the other sort of stories from Worlds later this week, including a look at some green villainy. I'm a big fan of Palpatine Yellow, so we're going to have a look at that as well. But in the meantime, we shall leave you to it, and hopefully you find the cards you need to play blue-red villainy.
Yeah,
and
it's not easy.
Yeah, if you don't, I'm so sorry. It's my fault.
Well, if you don't, you know what you got to do? You got to come and check out our next lot of videos and play one of those decks.
Exactly. That is the plan. Well, we will see you next time, guys. May the force be with you. See you around.
Bye.
Bye.